Hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanwo TV. Yes, I'm doing another video. Well, okay. This video was going to be called something reply to Steve Mumbling, alright, but I'm not going to make it that way because I don't want to do too many reply videos to Steve Mumbling. This is kind of a reply video to Steve Mumbling because it was one of his videos that inspired me to make the video you're seeing now. However, it's not really a reply because the subject I'm going to talk about, the subject which Steve made a 33-minute video about, is, well, it can't really be a reply because Steve didn't actually make many points in the video. The video he made is essentially it's a thread dissection of an argument he had with a guy called Victor Nevada, who is someone I know as well, and Steve only made one actual factual point, which I will be addressing. But this is, I'm going to go into this entire subject in more detail. So this is not a reply to Steve Mumbling. It's a presentation of the entire issue we're going to talk about today, which of course is the Alien interview. Now, I'll go into as much detail as I can. Because I don't want to cut any corners, because this is probably going to be the last video I make before it's eyes down for the general election, because as you know, next week is general election week and I will be focusing on that. There'll be a couple of videos, probably maybe more than one live stream, probably, plus maybe one or two other videos as well. I'll be doing a Hapanwo radio show on the subject. So next week is going to be general election special for me. So let's get the aliens out of the way now, shall we? Yes, the alien interview. Now, I don't want to confuse people because there is another series of videos coming out, more recent videos, called the Alien Interview, and it's there's a lady called Barbara I know who's interested in this. I met her at Probe, and this concerns like a psychic communication between a nurse and an alien at the Roswell incident. This is not the same thing. This is an earlier thing called. It's an earlier issue. When I refer to interview with an alien, it's something different, but all will be revealed. I mean, I'll explain to you exactly what that is, and there are links in the description box which include more details by me on this issue, including a Hapanwo radio show special and a long main site article. Now, I just want to, first of all, I want to read you something, because I came across a very disturbing YouTube video a couple of years ago. In fact, this was a video uploaded on the 4th of January 2015, and the YouTube user was called Jenny Area 51 Insider, and there's a long piece in the description box which is explaining everything. It explains everything about the video. I'll read you what it said in the description box. My name is, it doesn't matter, just call me Jenny. I was a scientist working for, actually I'm not 100% sure who I was working for. The truth is, I was originally a scientist on an average at an average pharmaceutical company laboratory. One day somebody in a dark suit who didn't introduce himself came to see me and said I'd been selected. He offered me a job with 5 times my current salary, no questions asked. Well, I jumped at it on the spot. I had to sign any number of secrecy papers, but I didn't stop to read the small print. My mortgage was a year in arrears. I was about to lose my house. My husband was threatening to run off with the kids. What would you have done? I travelled to work every day from Las Vegas McCarran International Airport on a Janet plane to the airbase you know as Area 51. I won't tell you its real name. From there I got on a bus without windows and a dark curtain over the driver's cab, and we drove a few miles to somewhere nearby. Don't know in which direction exactly. It was underground. I don't know how deep it was. It took 3 minutes down in a lift. That's all I can tell you. No stairs, no fire escape. Armed security guards in masks everywhere. Guns pointing at you every second. I can't give you too many details about my job. It might reveal my identity and that of others. But basically I had to do tests on these things. Creatures. I don't know what they were or where they came from, but the word is our employers have their spacecraft in hangars at ground level. The creatures were kept on the deepest level of the basement, little short, spindly humanoids. They were grey coloured and had wrinkly skin, almost reptilian. Their eyes, oh my god, they were like huge black holes. and if you looked into them, it gave you the strangest feeling, like they were reading your thoughts. I had to analyse what they call blood and skin, but it was nothing like that from any animal I was familiar with. I don't know if they were there of their own free will or whether they were kept prisoner. Some of them died, and once or twice we did a post-mortem. I had to film them with a camera. At the end of the examination, we always stored any film, photographs and documents in a special vault with an electronic registry system for checking items in and out. Anyway, yesterday after one of these examinations, I had to stow the film in, and the registry computer crashed just after I'd scanned the film in. It failed just in time before the door on the vault shut, so it was left hanging open. I suddenly realised that as far as the records were concerned, the film was filed correctly with the door sealed, but in fact it was still in front of me with the door open. If I took it out, nobody would ever know. I never planned this, honestly. The thought had never even crossed my mind before. The idea just suddenly popped into my head, and I acted instinctively. I knew I had to hide it because our pockets and bags are searched and scanned. The film was on a very small mini-disc, so I ripped a hole in my stocking and shoved it into my shoe. I pushed it down so it was under the arch of my foot and walked off. I could feel it there, digging into the sole of my foot. I hoped that the leather of my shoe would shield it from the body scanner we have to go through when entering or leaving the complex. God, I was scared, because if it wasn't hidden all right and I'd be caught red-handed. People on the staff just disappear every so often, and rumour has it they're not just sacked. But it was too late to turn back. Phew, the scanner didn't buzz. I tried hard to look and act normal as we went up in the lift to the big enclosed car park where the bus picks us up. When I got off at the Janet at McCarran, I almost fainted with relief. Anyway, I didn't go straight home, but used a library many miles away in another town. Don't want my home computer to be traced. I never had a YouTube account before, but it was easy to set one up anonymously. I had to convert the files because they're in some weird format, but I managed to do it. And so what you're seeing here is what I filmed. I think the world has a right to know what's going on in secret, deep below Area 51. So I clicked on the video and I watched it. I then went to I transferred it to my browser where I download it, and I was about to right click and download on Real Play, and suddenly the video was gone. It just said video not available, user account terminated through breaching our terms and conditions. The video was gone. I wonder if Jenny was alright. What happened to her? It's disturbing, isn't it? It's a disturbing story. Now, I mean, you may be listening to me telling you the story and wondering who Jenny is. Who is this YouTube Jenny, the woman behind this Jenny Area 51 Insider YouTube account, and whether her story is real or not? Okay, I'll tell you right now, it's not real. Jenny doesn't exist. Everything I've just told you I invented. I made up the story you've just heard. I'm a writer, aren't I? But why are you doing that, Ben? I mean, that's a bit of a... You think I'm like leading you on? It's a shaggy dog story, you know, don't you? No, there's a reason why I made up this story and I just told it to you, because there are many videos like that. There are many of them like that. I mean, some of them don't have these long angst-ridden blurbs, but some of them have much shorter descriptions or even no description. But there are several hundred videos on YouTube showing what looks like aliens in secret locations. There are varying degrees of quality and persuasiveness. And the best known, of course, is the Alien Autopsy, now completely discredited, unless you're Colin Wolford. And well, you know, I'm rethinking it as well, but it's not the Alien Autopsy is not the only one. That's the point. There are many others. Some of them are rather unconvincing. Some of them less so. Now, there are exceptions to there are exceptions which I think are much more realistic. I think older videos are more likely to be the real thing. Not always, though, but mostly, and that's because of the ability to create realistic images nowadays, and that's I think is a big issue. In fact, it's a curse of the modern age when it comes to UFO paranormal conspiracy theory subjects, because home photoshopping is just so easy that it's created a real catastrophic signal to noise ratio. As I said, there are hundreds of these videos. Some of them look maybe real, some of them may not be. Now, if you honestly, it's if some of them are real, I feel sorry for the uploaders. I really do, and the creators and the people who may well have risked their lives to bring us those videos. But how do you sort the wheat from the chaff? Because you could walk down a high street in Nairobi and purchase a software suite for an affordable price that will give you the ability to create realistic imagery that it is virtually impossible to prove as fake. Photographic evidence does not carry the same weight it used to. And because my fictional counterpart, that is Jenny, the real counterparts of my fictional character there, may exist. There may be real life people like her, and if they are, what do they do? What if they're in that situation? They manage to smuggle out some classified material they believe the world should know, and they smuggle it out WikiLeaks style. What do? Send their film to the press? No, because you'd suspect the package would be intercepted. Even things like WikiLeaks probably wouldn't touch this, or if they do, they're not publishing it if people have sent them this stuff for whatever reason. What I would do in that situation is publish it myself. I'd do it immediately and get it out there to the maximum possible audience. I think the real Jenny would indeed upload the material to YouTube or similar video sharing sites. She'd do it exactly as I explained in that little story I just told you. Now, of course, these videos have comments boxes underneath, don't they? And what would you read in those comments boxes? Another fake, total BS, pund. Get a life, mate. Fake as Jordan's tits. Oh, not another one. So the people who made these fake videos, they're doing a genuine disservice to proper investigation. And poor old Jenny, the real Jenny, would become the ultimate little boy who cried wolf through no fault of her own. That's the situation we're in, isn't it? But so, let us go on to what I think is a real life Jenny. And this is not a trick. What you're about to hear is real. I'll just fill you in with a bit of background now to this story. It's an interesting one, I must say. And of course, for those of you new to this subject, which most of my viewers are not, but just in case, over the years, decisive physical evidence of the presence of an extraterrestrial intelligence engaging the human race has been collected by the authorities, the government, the state, corporations in various kinds. The most well-known of these is the Roswell incident of 1947, and here is the famous headline, which is classic now, in black and white, flying disc captured. But Roswell is not the only one. There are many others, and indeed you should look at the work I've done on some of those others. But basically, to put it bluntly, and to quote the one and only Nick Pope, the government have got a saucer in their hangar, and what's more, they've got aliens in the freezer as well, and that is where this story comes from. And not just in the freezer as well, because there are living aliens too, which are kept either as prisoners or guests on planet Earth. And there's many other examples of this, such as the Nottinghamshire Roswell, the Russian whatever Roswell, Brazilian, several in the United States. It happens across the world, and that is the background to this story. The story I'm going to tell you probably emerges out of one of these events. And of course the classic, the one I've often referred to, is the Alien Autopsy. Now, obviously there's a difference of opinion on this between me and the people I know, like Colin Woolford, for example. I am reassessing the situation, as I explained in my previous UFO disclosure video, link in the description box. But what I'll do is, for the purpose of this film, I'll go over the theories I've had previously over the nature of this film. Okay, so just for convenience's sake. Now, the Alien Autopsy is, of course, the classic alien evidence scoop, and it was released in May of 1995, and that date could be significant for reasons that I'll detail. And it was a huge sensation across the world. In August of 1995, a US network documentary was broadcast all about the film, which achieved a massive viewing figures. It had Jonathan Frakes Star Trek star, presenting it, I remember. Now, contrary to what the skeptics will tell you, the film was not well reflected in terms of public approval within the ufological community. I don't know many experts who thought it was real. Colin, of course, Mark Zallen. Most of them, though, were either on the fence or they denounced it as a fake. Now, Philip Mantle, of course, is probably the most significant person in this, and he's written an essential and very definitive book on the subject, which I believe I've mentioned before. It's called, well, the first edition was called Alien Autopsy. I don't know what he's released 2 more editions since then. What's more, thanks to research of Philip and several other people, it didn't take long for gaps and inconsistencies to emerge in the film and in Santilli's story, and his small cluster of supporters began to drain away. And in 2006, Ray Santilli and Gary Shoefield made a full confession. Now, I'm the one who always says confessions can be faked, and yes, they can. But this one was timed to coincide with the premiere of the film Alien Autopsy from Warner Brothers, starring Anton Deck. And so there was a bit of viral marketing involved in that. This was 11 years later. Now, throughout the intervening decade, if you said Alien Autopsy to anybody, almost all of them would immediately think of the Santilli film. However, during that time frame, when all that fortune and media furore was being heaped onto the Alien Autopsy film, a second similar incident took place that received a fraction of the publicity. In fact, today, it is virtually unknown outside the UFO community. On Friday, July the 26th, 1996, just over a year after Alien Autopsy came out, a man phoned the Los Angeles office of a company called Rocket Pictures, which is a film and TV production service, and he claimed to be in possession of a VHS cassette containing taped footage of an extraterrestrial being. And for anyone younger than me, a VHS cassette is like Netflix in a black plastic brick. Got it, kids? Nah. Anyway, the man called himself Victor. That's the only name he gave, and he provided no further information about himself. Rocket Pictures asked to see the tape, and Victor sent them a copy, not the original, a copy with no soundtrack. After viewing it, they asked Victor if he'd be willing to be interviewed, and he agreed, but only under very stringent protocols. He went to extraordinary lengths to withhold his identity. This is a picture, this is, well, the only picture that he would allow Rocket Pictures to show of him. He wore a wig, a mask over his face, and as you can see here, was shot in silhouette. It looks like he's wearing a false beard. He also used a sound modulator to disguise his voice. He insisted that the interview be scripted with a list of questions that he had to approve first, and that was his very stringent conditions. Like I said, he revealed that he had been present at Area 51 a short time before. Now, Area 51, of course, is a highly secret military compound in Nevada, USA, rumoured to be the location of covert government UFO research. However, he wouldn't say what his job was there, or whether he was an employee, a contractor, visitor, only that he had cause to be present on the base for whatever reason. His demeanour is very sullen, very irritable, and one gets the sense that he feels frightened and insecure, and this is what Art Bell thought when he interviewed him. He speaks very slowly and carefully, as if contemplating all his words in advance. He chides the interviewer several times for deviating from the script, and at one point he walks out of the studio and has to be coaxed back. He gives a few details about how he managed to get hold of the recording. The film archive at Area 51 was all being transferred from videotape to digital disc, and during this process some of it was inadvertently mislaid in the incorrect data system, and this was how it came into Victor's possession. So, well, that's about it. That's all he would tell us. As I said, the film itself is silent. Now, if you want to see this, now, as I'm going to say, I should put a reference in here. If you want to see this film, and you want to see the interview with Victor, all you have to do is go to YouTube. and search for a video that is entitled Area 51 The Alien Interview, and you will find it. You'll find an hour, it's an hour and 5 minutes long, the documentary. It gives everything. So this film is silent, like I said. Victor said that the original has a soundtrack, but he removed it from the copy because he's concerned that it could disclose the identities of the people featured. The film is 2 minutes and 55 seconds long and is filmed from a single static camera on a continuous shot. The location is very dark and only a few small lights appear to be lit. In the foreground, two people sit with their backs to the camera, half in and half out of frame on either side. In front of them is what looks like a table on which are laid some unidentifiable objects, although one of them is clearly some kind of electronic display which has a pulsing blue-white light. Another object is set to the right of the table that looks like it might be some coat hangers, although that resemblance is probably spurious. The background is completely black, and only two squares of light show, which might be TV screens or windows. It is later revealed that they are actually reflections from light sources behind the camera on a glass partition that is placed between the people and the table. A spotlight is shone at the end of the table, revealing an unearthly creature with a large bulbous head and huge black eyes. Its skin appears orangey brown or terracotta in colour. This could be an effect of the light. Its lower face is diminutive and seems to consist of just a snout with a small mouth and no lips. No nose is visible, although it later turns out that the being has a small nose, very, very small and diminutive nose. On the entity's shoulders are visible, and they are very small in proportion to its head, by human standards. The being moves its head smoothly at first, as if looking around itself, but then it slumps over. I get the feeling it is sitting on a chair of some kind. It then starts throwing its head around in fast, jerky motions. The pulsating light of the device on the table changes its rhythm. This gives me the impression that this is some kind of medical monitor to which the being is hooked up, although it doesn't resemble any conventional vital signs monitors that are used in hospitals. I've seen many of those. This doesn't resemble any of them. The creature opens and closes its mouth over and over. It appears to be in distress. The two people in the foreground begin moving around too, as if concerned for the entity's well-being. Then two men emerge from the background, dressed in surgical scrubs, hats and masks, and medical gloves. They appear to be doctors, and they begin holding the being's head and examining its face with penlights. It's hard to be sure, but it looks as if red liquid is issuing from its mouth and a part of the face where the nose would be expected to be seen. One of the medics definitely wipes the creature's mouth with a cloth. On the bottom of the frame is printed a series of letters and numbers. DNI/27. Next to it is a time code. Well, that's what it looks like, which is set at 040018 at the start. Yet there are second fraction digits too, like an athletic stopwatch. It's not clear whether this indicates an elapsed time or the time of day. Victor says in the interview that DNI stands for Department of Naval Intelligence. However, there is no such organisation, at least in the United States, at least publicly. There is an Office of Naval Intelligence, but not a department. This is unless the Department of Naval Intelligence is a code name for part of the black budget world. And Victor explains actually that this is actually an interview, he calls it an interview anyway, in which the scientists on the project sit the alien being down and ask it questions. He describes the footage as late in a series of films made in a laboratory at S4, a super secret facility within the already top secret Area 51 base. S4 is alleged to be subterranean and lies underneath Papoose Lake, which is a dry lake bed south of Groom Lake, where the main Dreamland base is. And another witness, Bob Lazar, has already gone public about his service there. There are a number of aliens living at S4, whether as guests or prisoners, nobody is completely sure. The reason that there is a glass partition is because it is actually a window. The alien is sitting in a separate room, which is hermetically sealed to protect it from infection, not to protect humans from it. It is very sensitive to terrestrial microbes, apparently. The being can't speak, but can communicate telepathically, and so a human with psychic abilities, termed a telepath, needs to be present to interpret the being's thought forms into human language. If you think this is a bit far-fetched, I should refer you to my film about, well, it's more than one, my various videos about Helen Duncan, the medium who was tried as a witch, and the connection there to the remote viewing and things like that. There are a number of researchers sitting on the near side of the partition along with the psychic. Behind the camera there are allegedly, according to Victor, a number of other seats. The entity being filmed has been at S4 since 1989, so we can date the time of the interview between that year and 1996, when Victor went public. Once or twice a month the researchers carry out these interviews for a few hours, and if they try to do so any more often or for longer periods, the alien becomes unresponsive. Victor describes this program as having limited success. Translation of its thoughts via the psychic is not always reliable. When it comes to scientific subjects, communication often breaks down. The project's expert thinks the experts think this is because humans are not capable of understanding the advanced level of knowledge that the being's species have achieved. Humbling, that, isn't it? Interestingly, the entity finds it easier to share information on spiritual concepts like the nature of the soul, life after death, and reincarnation. It regards the body as a temporary material vessel or container for an eternal etheric spirit, a common concept in many of the human world's religions. The reason the laboratory is so dark is because the aliens can't stand bright light. Now, their meagre build suggests that they evolved in a habitat that has a weaker gravitational field than that of the Earth, and the creature did strike me as finding it difficult to hold its head upright. And I can imagine myself being in a higher gravity environment and feeling really heavy. It must be horrible. It can breathe our atmosphere with difficulty, and this may well be one of the reasons these creatures suffer from so many health problems, and they need to be sealed off from the rest of the world. Maybe they need a special mixture of gases for their own air supply, which is different from what humans normally breathe. Victor actually says that the emergency response from the medical team is far too slow, and that the physicians chosen for the project tend to be selected on the grounds that they're unlikely to spill the beans rather than for their professional confidence. Same policy with NHS whistleblowers. Yeah. So that there is the subject we're going to talk about today. Now, Rocket Pictures, they decided to ask a few people about this, some special effects designers, movie prop producers, things like that. And it turns out they asked 3 people. They were divided over the issue. They went to the Academy Award winner Rick Baker, who's worked on several big movies, and he said unequivocally, this is a puppet. It's a puppet with an operator sitting behind it in the dark, and it's basically a glove puppet, a very elaborate glove puppet, a bit like Punch and Judy. He's sitting out of sight, he's got his hand inside the head of the creature, and he's operating that, including the mouth, by going like that and moving around like that. Now, this is what Steve Mumbling claims in his video. Now, obviously I disagree with Steve Mumbling on that, as I do with I disagree with him on most things, and I'll explain why. Now, there was another one called Jim Delatoso. Now, he said that firstly he analysed the video, and he says it was indeed a copy from an original. It wasn't indeed a copied video. In fact, he thinks it may be a 3rd generation copy, but he couldn't work out how the effect would have been made. There's another guy called John Criswell. Now, he's like Rick Baker. He makes special effects dummies and props and things like that, and puppets and things for TV shows. And he's a bit more, he's cautious, but unlike Rick Baker, he concedes that special effects could not explain everything, and he says if this is a fake, it's extraordinarily good. As far as Rick, but he said that he said it was possible it was a glove puppet or indeed a marionette. He said that the darkness would be used to hide the puppeteer, who'd be dressed in black clothing, behind the creature in the dark, or the darkness was used to hide marionette strings. So basically there were strings holding the creature up, and someone above the frame was operating the puppet with these strings. The ufologist persuasion was similarly mixed. Now, Robert Dean, he watched it, and he's got a reputation for being an empath, and he cried. He was really moved by it, and he said he was very upset by what he saw. He believed it was real. Whitley Strieber said that he hopes to God it's fake, because if it's not, it makes him ashamed for mankind, because they see essentially an alien being put in like what's like a zoo. The skeptics are going to love this, but Rocket paid Victor some money, and Steve Mumbling's going to love this too. They paid him some rights for the use of the footage, but Victor is unrepentant about that. Whoever Victor is, no one's ever found out. That's an important point actually, and I'll come to that. He's aware of how the money angle will be interpreted, but he says he's endangered his life and his career, at least, and he wants a degree of financial compensation and the funds necessary to protect himself should the authorities attempt some kind of retribution against him, which is a possibility, isn't it? In the end, Rocket produced a TV documentary about the interview. It was presented by Stephen Williams, the actor who plays the Black Mr. X in the X-Files, and you get to see the complete uninterrupted playback footage. And if you want to see it, just look Area 51 interview with an alien, you'll find it. And of course, Victor was interviewed by Art Bell on Coast to Coast, and well, what happened after that? Not a lot, strangely enough. This is very much a cold case. Now, Victor's strategy, he's different. He's very, very different from other people in his position, people like Bob Lazar and David Adair, because those men chose to reveal their identity. Although Bob Lazar at first appeared silhouetted, but what they did was, the reason they revealed their identity because they hoped no one would dare open fire in the middle of a crowd. That was their strategy. They believed that that once they'd gone public, if anything happened to them, for example, if Bob Lazar committed suicide or had a heart attack, it would prove him right in the eyes of many. So it would be unproductive for the keepers of the secret to attempt any violent retaliation against Lazar. What they hope he would do, and indeed they hope all people like this do, it seems to be usually their position, unless there's some reason why they don't, is just let him ramble on, hope as few people as possible take him seriously. That's their position. Victor is very differently. He guards his anonymity like an internet troll, the crown jewels, in other words, like Team Droik. If he was to fall under a bus, you might think, well, no one's going to know, is it? So they can take him out if they find out who he is, because no one's going to know he was gone, because no one knows who he is. Which I think is what Bob Lazar and David Adair did. But what Victor said in the TV documentary, and indeed I think he hopes his former employers are watching, is that he's made plans, and the money is a part of this, that should anything happen to him, there's a dead man's trigger involved, and the nature of his demise would not be silent, just so basically he's trying to protect himself in that way. The reaction to the alien interview really has been negligible outside the world of UFOs and conspiratorial interest groups. Now, I think this is because the Alien Autopsy was enjoying the limelight. That's an important point. Now, there's a very big difference between the Alien Autopsy and the Alien Interview, because, as I explained, there's been a lot of breakthroughs in the research into the Alien Autopsy. Research into the interview has failed to turn up any clues at all. Victor remains untraceable, unidentified, enigmatic. No one knows where he is, where he has been, or even if he's alive or dead. I mean, I know the skeptics will never believe this, but ufologists are not just like wide-eyed believers. The best ones have the tenacity of Chandler-esque detectives. They're like Sherlock Holmes. They can usually shake some information from the tree, even if it's ambiguous and disputed. And look how quickly they did with the autopsy. But with the interview, it's totally different. The background to Victor and his story remain nebulous. They've come to the trail has gone completely cold. Now, funnily enough, in many years later, 11 years later, actually in June 2007, after 11 years after the documentary was produced, totally out of the blue, guess what happens? Victor contacts Rocket Pictures again, and he asks for a new interview. And this time they say yes, but he demands further payment. And the interview's outdoors. What happens is the host picks him up in a car, and they drive out into the countryside, and they park up in a lay-by. Very sort of low tech, really. But funny enough, Victor has disguised himself again. But there's a few theatrics to his disguise, and indeed Andrew Burlington, Victor Nevada, has sort of copied this. It's quite funny. He's wearing a rubber mask, a comical rubber mask, which is the mask of the American statesman Donald Rumsfeld, and in his hand he's carrying a back scratcher. He certainly hasn't mellowed over the 11 years between the two interviews. I'll tell you, his mood has not lightened. In fact, he sounds more frightened and belligerent than ever in the second interview. And again, you can find that very easily. Just put in Victor Alien interview. Any of these search strings will lead you to the correct video. He was very unhappy about his feature on Coast to Coast. He's highly critical of the Rocket Pictures, their treatment of him, and the documentary. He regrets getting involved with Coast to Coast, which is and indeed I think Rocket, which is odd because he asked for a second interview. There's another kind of contradiction as well, because he vocally rebukes the ufology community. Because he sees they haven't investigated his case properly. I think that's unfair, quite frankly. And he says they're selfish, they're egotistical in promoting themselves personally in this issue. And it's very odd because in the midst of expressing this annoyance at people for not debunking his video and saying, you haven't done it, you haven't investigated properly, at the same time he boasts about how nobody's managed to debunk it. And later on in the interview, Victor becomes unwell. He begins panting and spluttering, and the host asks him if he wants a glass of water, and he says no. He sort of bows his head a little bit, appropriately in a similar manner to the alien in the footage. And then he goes on to talk about figures in government and who are behind the UFO agenda. He says that Dick Cheney, who was the vice president in 2008, knows everything. Donald Rumsfeld is what he calls a bombastic clown, which is odd regarding Victor's disguise. Is he implying that Rumsfeld knows nothing but as a pawn, having his back scratched by those higher up who know everything? I don't know. He says President Bush is an ignorant puppet. And he says maybe Obama, who's president-elect at the time, is the same. I don't know. I mean, I wonder what would he say with Trump? I mean, this was 2008. I mean, what would he think of Trump? I don't know. He didn't know Trump was going to be president. He then says something, because he's coughing and spluttering, and he's obviously not well. He says that his vessel has reached its expiration date, and he's using the alien context here to say that he's terminally ill. Because the aliens use the term vessel to describe the body, and there's the soul, which is separate. So he believes what he's saying is he's dying. And then he predicts, in a very chilling tone, the end of the world very soon. He doesn't elaborate on how it might happen, but he does say it's connected to the relationship between human leaders and the aliens at S4. What's good is he actually predicts that it would happen before the year 2017. This was 2008, and of course it's now 2019 and it hasn't happened yet. Maybe they're just a bit late, I don't know. I mean, people are always predicting the end of the world. But Victor then ends with a quote from Strabo, who's a Greek philosopher from the 1st century, which sums up his mindset. He says, "When I am gone, let earth and fire mix. It'll mean nothing to me." So Rocket released the new interview as part of their special edition DVD. It includes both the original 1997 documentary and the 2008 interview. They're both on YouTube now. This bonus footage, but it's received limited attention, moderate attention. It's mostly people within the UFO community who purchased it. After all, it's just one more Alien Autopsy, right? So nothing like surfaced for a while, and if Victor's self-prognosis is correct, then he must have passed away. Certainly no one's heard any more from him. But then in 2013, a new voice enters the equation. It is a guy called Andrew Burlington, a man from London. In fact, you might have seen him because he's been in a couple of my videos, and he has reopened the debate under the web name Victor Nevada, and he's got his channel, the Alien Interview, which I do recommend. I know him personally. We have dealt with each other personally. I should point out that we're not on good terms, unfortunately, because of this is to do with the Larry Warren business and things associated with that. But I have not changed my mind on his research. That I still think is valid. He goes through it frame by frame, and the thing is, what's most interesting, he picks out things missed by Jim Dilettoso, John Quiswell, and Rick Baker. For instance, the eyes of the being seem to change shape. They're not fixed as they would be on a dummy. It has working eyelids, although it doesn't completely shut its eyes, but it seems to be able to alter the skin around its eyes. This appears that it has some kind of musculature in its forehead, in its eye sockets. Now, this can be simulated. It can be simulated using a robotic attachment. It's called animatronics, rather like the model of the girl's head in the movie The Exorcist, for example. But it's very difficult to do properly, and it's very expensive. If the effect is to be believable, it lies beyond the capabilities of anybody but a professional film studio. And when the medics bring out the pen lights, we see this creature's shoulders, its up arms, torso, and it appears to move these, albeit very feebly. It shrugs its right shoulder slightly when the man lays his hand on it. And then it's Andrew's also seen the red fluid. He also points out the red fluid, and it looks as if the eyes are reacting to the presence of the light. The movement of the mouth is more pronounced as well. Now, there's another guy called Sean David Morton. I actually interviewed him for my show in the description box on Hapanmo Radio, and also Victor has done a little monologue there as well. Now, Sean found the electronic instrument with the pulsating light, especially interesting because the pulsating light changes on this instrument at exactly the right time as the creature becomes distressed, and this pulse changes, and that would be hard to synchronize if it was a puppet. This makes me think that this is some kind of medical monitor, like I said, and it's measuring the being's heartbeat or whatever else it has inside its body, which is similar to a heart. This thing responds to the changes in the creature's condition. And Jaime Maussan actually took the footage to a cardiologist, and the cardiologist agreed that the film was real for that reason. Now, if it was a puppet, how would the operator synchronize their movements with the light pulse? This is the point, because this was all filmed together on a single shot. I actually wrote to Sean, and he said that was the case, and that's how I got talking to Sean, and we eventually did the Hapanmo Radio show you see in the description box. And Andrew also picked up an error made up by Jim Dilettoso in the original investigation, because Dilettoso claims that the video's footage, its original footage, the original footage was shot on film, and of course Victor the witness said that the film was digitally recorded from videotape. Now, it was transferred from videotape. Dilettoso thinks there are two square lights in the background, which he says are TV screens, and if you see a video shot that includes a TV screen, it'll have these little lines on it, which is like these are like interference lines radiating, called Moray patterns. Now, he assumes that these square lights are TV screens. I can't tell what they are. I thought they might be little windows, but even if they're TV screens, so be it. But then Andrew spotted the point that when the medics burst in, you see one of them moves in front of these screens, which means that the screen has to be a reflection from a glass panel in front between the medic and the camera. It's a reflection, which again is what Victor said. He said there was a glass panel between the two things, and that will back up Victor's testimony, because he said there was a glass partition in place between the filming of the chamber and the chamber containing the alien, because it's hermetically sealed to protect it from germs, and maybe it has different air to breathe, things like that. That's very interesting. And there's also the fact that something else, I'll come to that in a minute actually, so I'm just going through my notes here. There's also a strange link here. It's tantalizing actually. in the appearance of the alien itself. And now there was some leaked documents discovered by Tony Dodd. And Tony Dodd is a brilliant investigator. He's done a really good book, actually, UFO Investigator. Came out actually. It was actually came out after this thing, which is some people have made a big deal about that, but it actually came out. The book came out after the alien interview, but you may be familiar with Tony Dodd's book because of Richard D. Hall of Rich Planet, because he actually tracked down he's tracked down this business to do with the human mutilations. Tony Dodd had a mate of his who was no one's ever published his real name, but he was a friend of Tony Dodd's who said he was involved in special forces and they used to attend crash retrievals and there were dead human bodies and things like that. Check out the NATO human mutilation cover-up, because that's a very, very good documentary there by Rich Planet. But anyway, what Tony Dodd says was the South African Air Force shot down a UFO on the 7th of May 1989. That was back then. Bob Lazar was strutting his stuff in S4 as well. It's interesting. The object came down to the Kalahari Desert just over the border into Namibia, but the South Africa crossed the border and they salvaged the object and transported it to the United States, which seems to be the inevitable end of so much. You get the same thing with the Virginia incident. It seems there's a global policy in place, and one of those is it all goes to the United States. It's a really interesting story how Tony found all this out, because he actually blagged his way into talking to a South African Air Force general just by phoning up. It was incredible. I mean, it's amazing. Anyway, the craft is said to have 2 alien beings on, which match the creature in Victor's film. Terracotta skin, big black eyes, this gourd-shaped head with the bulbous protrusions. It looks very much, this description matches very much what you see in the film. And Andrew says there are marks on its head which could match injuries sustained during the crash, which is what the South African documents reveal. It could explain the entity's poor health. And Victor the witness said the creatures arrived at S4 in 1989, which is the same year as the Kalahari crash. And the interviews, of course, finished soon afterwards, after a few years. Now, some people have said that Victor made up the story by getting his information from Tony Dodd's book, Alien Investigator, but the book was only published in 1999, 3 whole years after the alien interview came to light, the tape. However, some people, of course, will accuse Tony Dodd of copying it from Victor. Anyway, the most interesting thing Andrew comes out with, actually, excuse me, is that Jim Teletoso brightened up the image, and it's odd that he doesn't mention this, but you actually see it on a screen over in the 1997 documentary. Funny, Andrew noticed this, but Teletoso didn't. How incompetent can one be by accident, I wonder? Or was he censored? I don't know. But by brightening up the image, and actually Andrew Victor Nevada went and did this himself, and you see some features of the creature that are normally shrouded by darkness. They're now visible. We see the upper body of the creature quite distinctly. And we can see the edge of the table. We can see the pulsating light instrument. We can see more equipment on the table. We can see that the people sitting in the foreground one of them has a patch on their sleeve and an epaulette. It looks a bit like a military uniform. Either that or they're hospital porters. Which does, I don't know, that's quite likely, isn't it? I mean, they always let us hospital porter singles on anything. They let us all in on anything, don't they? But the most important thing is you can't see anyone else in the scene. Rick Baker said the alien is a large glove puppet, like Punch and Judy. So where's the puppeteer? There's nobody sitting behind the being. You'll be able to see someone with their hand basically inserted in a hole in the back of the head of the creature. You can't see it when you brighten up the scene. There are no marionette strings in the brightened up image, and also when you think about it, when the medics actually enter and shine their torches all over the place, you don't see marionette strings there either. Also, what the medics' bodies, they actually lean over. These things would interfere with the strings, even if they were not there. So what does that leave? Sherlock Holmes put it very well, didn't he? When you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, has to be the truth. Now, the big smoking gun for me is the lack of confessions. And it's worth comparing the Alien interview to the Alien Autopsy. Philip Mantle details in his book, the ufologists, they turned their prying eyes on the autopsy film, and Santilli's cards fell to the table very quickly. We now have more people coming out. We have John Humphreys, who was the sculptor. We have other people, Gary Shoefield, of course, Spiros Malaris, all these other people who were involved in this project. And I've discussed this with Colin. You may have seen Spiros' show. It's looking pretty much like if you look at, when you investigate closely enough, a good investigator, pretty much you'll pretty soon you will find these sort of things. John Humphreys, who built the fake alien, basically. Ironically, he also did the one in the Warner Brothers movie. There's the irony. There was the butcher that supplied the dummy's innards, and indeed, then Spiros came forward. It all came out. Philip, to be fair, he did a damn good job, Philip Mantle, in this whole issue. And I know Colin and he have had his differences, and I'm now in I don't know what I think right now about the whole thing, but there's been, in a sense, Colin himself he's contributed to this. I know that Philip might not think that, but Colin has contributed in his own way by doing his own investigation, keeping the focus alive. Now, you see where I'm getting at now. It's the exact opposite with the interview. Exact opposite. Let's just imagine that the alien interview is faked. Why has the same not happened when you consider that people were investigating that too? Because the making of the alien interview must have been at least as intricate, at least as expensive, at least as demanding as the Santilli film. It may be more so because you have a moving puppet with moving parts, you have a larger cast, things like that. And so you'd have to find a rich investor to fund the project, like we've read about from the people involved, Spielberg, etc., which I talked about with Colin. You'd have to find a location big enough to build a studio, secluded enough not to arouse suspicion from the neighbours. You need a team of designers to build the puppet, which is more elaborate than the Santilli one that he put on that table in Camden Town. It's got to move, animatronic fittings. There's props, the light pulse machine, the screens, things like that. The costumes. The Victor's disguises, the medical uniforms, the uniforms of the people, of the military man watching. So the cast is at least 5, right? There's 2 medics, 2 people sitting in front, the telepath and someone else. You have the cameraman, of course, and you have the person operating the puppets. That's more than 5, actually. With Santilli, it was just 3. You'd have to rehearse many times, and it would only have been after a number of takes that you could get it right. Okay, so this is a big project. It's an expensive project. Number of people would have had to work on it. So where are they? Why has not one of these people spoken out? It's a baffling conspiracy of silence, isn't it? You know how the I fooled the world. You know how incredibly lucrative that is. It set Santilli and Shoefield up for life, hasn't it? So a large group of people are involved. They're not only sitting on a secret, they're sitting on a gold mine. Why? Now, John Criswell actually said it best. He said the designer of this puppet could have got a job in Hollywood easily. So maybe they have, or if not, why haven't they? And if they have got it, if they do work in Hollywood, wouldn't they want an achievement like this on their CV? Wouldn't they be tempted at some point to brag about it to one of their chums at a drunken late-night party in Beverly Hills? The world of movie special effects, the industry, it's not a community of millions. It's an exclusive club of just a small number of people. Most people in it know most others. Could they really keep a secret that big? But nothing's come out about the alien interview. The alien interview is nothing. Is silent. It's dumb. It's stunned. it's mute. It's the opposite of the Alien Autopsy. Not a single clue has been so much has been glimpsed that might expose it as a hoax. In fact, all the research has led in the other direction. It is converging, I think, on the likelihood that the video is genuine. It really is a film of an alien. It was really smuggled out of Area 51, just like Victor the Witness said it was. So if it's a real alien video, what does this mean? We've reached an impasse, really. I mean, the research has been done. Well, we only have the words of Victor. Electronically altered, anonymous, evasive, and the video enigmatic, provoking, isolated. And the stalemate is actually caused, I think, by the governments of the world and their policies towards UFOs. They're to be kept secret from the public at all costs, classified higher than the H-bomb, as Wilbert Smith said. Progress to reveal the truth about the alien interview must now be part of the greater strategic effort to gain full disclosure on everything to do with extraterrestrials. And of course, new information is coming out every day. We're always hearing a lot of things. I mean, since I first started looking into this, there's been huge developments, which I've talked about in my previous disclosure, in my UFO disclosure series, which you can see in the links in the show notes, in the description box. And this is where I think I would like to suggest a possibility to do with the alien autopsy, not a certainty, a possibility. To keep this falsehood going, this brazen dishonesty, it's likely that the government uses a full spectrum of psychological warfare, disinformation, the positive seeding of inaccurate and deceptive material to distract and confuse the target. This inevitably brings us back to the alien autopsy. Now, according to researchers like Philip Mantle, Santilli was something of a wheeler dealer. He wanted to earn a few bob. He had no interest in UFOs and the paranormal, but he noticed that the mythology of Roswell was a lucrative market to exploit. Mantle does not suspect Santilli of any deeper wrongdoing. I've never met Ray Santilli. I've got no direct evidence that he is in any way a fraud, or in any way he is deceptive for a political reason. He's part of any kind of disinformation campaign. I've met Spiros Malaris. I've spoken to him. I've interviewed him. I do not suspect him of being part of any conspiracy as part of to maintain the truth embargo or anything like that. I believe these guys were involved for personal reasons and, of course, financial reasons. It was essentially it was a hoax, like you said, but it wasn't done to spread disinformation. Now, if it wasn't created as a piece of disinformation, might it have been streamlined on its path to publicity, though? That's the question. Because it just happened to be the right kind of material that just happened to appear that could be used as disinformation. That I think is more likely, and the purpose of that is to distract and repel people's interest away from the alien interview and possibly other similar real alien videos. Now you may wonder if that's possible. How would it work? It's easiest to understand if you pretend that for a moment that the Alien Autopsy film never existed. What would happen if the Alien Autopsy film had never existed or never become famous? The chances are that the alien interview would have received more attention from the media and the public than it did. It wouldn't have been drowned out by the clamour and the hype of the autopsy. And the autopsy, I believe, or used to believe, it was patently bogus. And this was worked out very quickly from day one. But as you watched it, this slow, sweet, agonised train wreck of its demolition, under the floodlights of the TV cameras of the world, an important cultural and psychological concept was being implanted in the collective human mind. Simple equation: alien video equals fake video. So, if any members of the public, non-UFO interested, happen to find the alien interview, they would turn away without a second look. You can just imagine it, can't you? Oh dear Marjorie, it's just another of those silly contrived space alien things that students get up to. Switch it over, will you? EastEnders is on in a minute. You know what I'm talking about. I don't know why students keep getting blamed for these sorts of things. So, if it wasn't for Autopsy, the people of the world would have had access to, I'll say it, a probably genuine video of a secret interview with an alien. And instead they got this rubber mannequin with offal and two guys in beekeeper suits plodding around it, which very publicly was exposed as a fraud. Now somebody is probably already typing in the comments section, but Ben, there's an obvious flaw to your hypothesis. The Alien Autopsy film was released more than a year before the interview happened. Well, before the Victor came forward. How did the instigators of the disinformation campaign know in advance that the interview was about to emerge? It's not possible unless they could see the future. Well, I think if you do that, if you say that, you assume the interview footage was stolen very soon before Victor's debut, and I'm sure the authorities didn't know when or if Victor was going to go public with his scoop. They may even not know that Victor was responsible, but they probably would have worked out that the footage was missing. And when Victor absconded, they would have found out who it was. So they would therefore have feared exactly what was about to happen. They would have taken precautionary steps in advance to mitigate its impact. In other words, get your disinformation in first. And I also suspect that the autopsy might have been publicised not just to cover up the alien interview, but also other similar materials that leaked. Now, a few years before the autopsy came out, the Cold War ended. Despite all Mikhail Gorbachev's efforts to restructure it, make it more open, the Soviet Union collapsed. Formally disbanded in December 1991, and the KGB, the famous intelligence service, was closed forever. The authorities knew very well that within the KGB's vaults lay millions of highly classified files related to all kinds of sensitive subjects, including UFOs. There's one called, I think it's called The Russian Roswell. It's Roger Moore of James Bond. He presents it. And it's a very interesting documentary, because the authorities knew very well that the hemorrhage of the KGB files would be impossible to stop in the chaos of the transition to the new Russia. That all the information would end up on the black market, where anyone can get hold of a UFO file for the right price. Indeed, that's how the producers of the TV show got it. They basically met someone in a Moscow pub, handed over some money, and this guy handed over a big box of film canisters. The motivation for the Alien Autopsy, not necessarily creating it, but as I say, speeding it on its way to success, might have been an attempt to use that cliche from Blazing Saddles, head 'em off at the pass. Next year is going to be the 25th anniversary of the Alien Autopsy film. There'll be lots of events to commemorate it, books, films, public meetings, and I'll probably be covering it. But it could be an opportunity for the alien interview to reclaim its rightful place, the one that the autopsy usurped. It's only one more year after that, and it's the interview's second decade. Unless Victor's got his his Armageddon story wrong by 3 or by 4 years. Or will there be more distracting hype based around the autopsy for a new offensive? I think the general disclosure efforts, people like Stephen Bassett and many others, are a vital tactic against generally all the issues associated with this, and possibly the truth about the alien interview coming out might be as a kind of a sideshow to the main issue to do with UFO secrecy in general. We'll see what happens, but anyway, thanks to Andrew Burlington, Sean David Morton for the work they've done on this. I appreciate what they've done. It's been very, very good of them to do that. I think the alien interview is probably real. I'm pretty much 95% sure it's real, for the reasons I've explained. Steve Mumbling has once again got it wrong, and So this is my position on the whole issue. I thought one of the reasons I made this film was because I mentioned it briefly in my last one. That is my Rua video, Reply to Steve Mumbling. And I thought it was about time I covered this subject in detail. So I hope you enjoyed me covering it in detail. And please stay tuned. If anything you want to know about the general election was afraid to ask, I'll be covering it in the following week. When it comes to this subject, the general election is in just over a week's time, on Thursday the 12th of December. Then it's Christmas. But yeah, I'll be doing a couple of live streams, probably more than one, probably one before and one after at least. Maybe a couple more videos as well about the general election, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, thank you all very much for watching Hapanwo TV yet again. Hospital Port as Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.